Roman Catholic priests around the world. About 10% of those are here in the United States. It is a powerful position, sacred to the vast majority of those called to the priesthood. We cannot, however, escape the thousands of claims of sexual abuse, many substantiated, some not, that have surfaced over the past few years. And we can also not escape the response by the hierarchy of the church. We're going to talk about this tonight with Charles Bailey. Mr. Bailey has written the book, In the Shadow of the Cross. This book details his abuse at the hands of a priest when Charles Bailey was a boy of 10. He wrote the book when he was 53. Charles Bailey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to point out right off the top that in the first chapter of this book in particular, it is very graphic about what happened to you. We are not going to get into the graphic details in this conversation, but if people want to read about that, they can, and they can also contact you through your website, which we'll get to a little later.
Yes.
But again, you wrote this at 53. This was 43 years after this abuse began. Why at that time, and what pushed the story out there then?
What pushed the story out then was the Boston breaking in January of 2002. It was everywhere on the news. So that part brought it to a head. And when I entered therapy after my wife's suggestion, between her and Dr. Driscoll there, I was putting my thoughts down on paper. Dr. Driscoll recommended that I just tell my story to myself. And that's how it happened. That first chapter, that is very graphic, yes. But I believe it has to be to tell people exactly what someone goes through. And I wrote that in like 20 minutes.
Was that almost like writing a journal?
Yes, it was. It was kind of a journal, telling myself my story, yes.
So I want to go back to this. When the news broke out of Boston, and when people began coming forward who had dealt with abuse, again, decades earlier, did you think, oh my gosh, that's me?
Oh, I did, absolutely. I had thought that Thomas Nearing, my abuser, was an anomaly as a child and growing up. I didn't realize he was one of thousands. And there's a little relief. It's a double-sided sword, if you will. There's relief that I'm not the only one, but then you feel horrible that somebody else went through what you went through.
You understand how some of the people who have come forward were asked, why didn't you come forward earlier? And some have said, I had pushed this so far out of my mind that I basically didn't remember it as freshly as some others do, that people can tamp things down so far that they can basically forget about them for a while.
Yes, your mind goes into a self-preservation mode to some extent. Some people are able to suppress their memories from it happening as a child, that others cannot. I could not suppress the memories. It was with me from the first day it happened.
So it was with you every day?
Yes.
Explain to me, as you went through those 43 years before you wrote the book, were you able to experience happiness and joy as well with this shroud?
Yes, I did. I mean, I'm very grateful for my wife and family and children and grandchildren. They are a tremendous source of joy to me. But growing up as a young boy and a teenager and a young man, even when something would transpire that was happy, we're playing, football or baseball or whatever game we're playing, and our team would win, everyone was happy, but I just wasn't happy as them. I still felt on the outside. I just didn't feel maybe I deserved to be happy.
Well, and let's talk about that a moment, because whenever we examine people who are victims of abuse, those victims are made to feel they're guilty.
Correct.
They did something wrong, whether it is with someone carrying the position of a priest or someone carrying the position of a parent or an adult at some level. Turn the guilt on the other person. How have you learned to say, that's wrong, I'm not going to accept that guilt?
It took several years of therapy to convince me of that, because guilt is a good thing. If you've done something wrong, that occasion arises again, the guilt rears up, and I shouldn't do that again. But this is a confusion that most victims have, is that we feel guilt when really what we feel is regret. I regret that it happened to me. I have no guilt because I didn't do anything. It was done to me by an adult. I was a child. But it takes a long time to get to that place.
This adult died in 2001.
Correct.
You visited his gravesite.
Yes.
Was it a sense of relief knowing this man could never harm you or anyone else again?
Absolutely. When I visited his gravesite, stood over his tombstone, and I actually leaned down beside it, touched it, and I could just feel the evil emanating up from the ground. I was so happy that not one more child would be abused by this person.
A lot of what we have discussed over the years, Mr. Bailey, regarding the scandal within the church has been the church's response. This priest was never prosecuted.
Correct.
How did the church handle him?
Anytime there was a alleged abuse, he was moved to another parish. So far, I've traced him to 18 parishes in a little over 40 years. A family would come forward, confront the bishop about Father Neary's actions, and he would be transferred to another parish.
Were you able to talk with those in authority with the church of why he was not stopped?
Yes, I was. The bishop had said that he thought basically they could treat him and pray it away, basically, that he could be healed through counseling and prayer.
Did you ever want to say to the bishop or ever say to him, my gosh, can't you see what is happening? You can't let this go on.
Yes, absolutely.
And the response?
Response is that they feel their hands are tied, that they can only do so much. They don't draw in the civil authorities, which is what a major part of this problem is. They handle it in-house.
And as you have watched how the church has responded over the years, how Rome has responded over the years, has it made you angry?
Oh, absolutely. I've been livid. Before Benedict became Pope, he was Cardinal Ratzinger, and he wrote a letter to all bishops worldwide on how to conceal cases of abuse, what to do with the records. It's despicable.
And before we take a break, was it how to conceal or was it how to deal with this and that led to concealment?
That's probably more accurate, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more of Charles Bailey's story. We'll be right back with more of On the Record in just a moment. Welcome back. We are on the record tonight with Charles Bailey, who has written a book called In the Shadow of the Cross. Mr. Bailey suffered sexual abuse at the hands of a Roman Catholic priest when he was age 10. Wrote this book 43 years later. We mentioned at the top of the program, Mr. Bailey, that there's some 400,000 or so priests around the world, 40,000 or so in this country. Not every Catholic priest, not every Anglican priest, although they all look alike, sometimes with the same collar, are sexual predators and pedophiles. Here in this diocese, Bishop Michael Burbidge has carried on the position of his predecessor, Joseph Gossman, in the Raleigh diocese, and has and continues to have a zero tolerance on the question of sexual abuse by priests. I spoke with Bishop Burbidge just a week ago at a media appreciation luncheon. In fact, he spent a great deal of time talking about the scandal. And one of the things he said, and I'm going to quote him here, whenever I hear of any case of abuse, whether it happened 40 years ago or recently, it grieves me very deeply. The church has to pay very, very close attention to all of this. Do you believe that the Roman Catholic Church is doing what it should do at this time, or are still in an area, from your standpoint, of not beginning to do enough?
I don't think they're even starting to do enough. I don't think they've crossed that threshold. Every time they speak, it's full of platitudes and almost to the point of being condescending. They treat it, as you will read and see, they treat it as a sin. Well, okay, it's a sin, but it's a crime. It's a felony crime to do this to children, and they don't seem to acknowledge or address that. They use euphemisms like inappropriate contact, inappropriate touch by a priest. They say it was a mistake made by the priest. Well, you and I know a mistake is getting off the wrong exit on 440 here. That's a mistake. Raping a child can't be classified as that. It's way past time that the church addresses this as a felony crime, which is what it is.
What would the threshold look like if the church had crossed that? I mean, the church can't bring forth the charges, but what I believe I hear you saying is they would push that person toward the authorities to let them know what had happened.
Absolutely. Instead of trying to handle it internally, I'm not sure with this diocese. I'm trying to meet with the bishop here, but I know the Syracuse diocese has a review process whereby the victims assistance coordinator is the first contact. They write it up. It goes before a review board. They look at it, then it goes to the bishop. He looks at it, and the first call should be to the police. There should be a written report by the police. It should go there first. They should not sit and decide whether it's something that should be pursued or not, or whether it meets their standards that it should be disclosed.
To let law enforcement make
We
that
should
decision.
have law enforcement are the professionals. This is what they do for a living. This is what they're paid for, educated in, and are experts in. They should be the ones determining whether it's a credible allegation or not. So many times the church will come out with, well, this wasn't a credible allegation. Well, they're not trained experts in this. We have trained experts in this. Let them do the investigation.
And I should point out, I neglected to do this at the beginning of the program, that this happened to you when you were living in Syracuse,
Correct.
New York. So with what that diocese is doing now in Syracuse, is that a direct result of your involvement?
I believe I had an impact on it, yes, absolutely. Between myself and my wife, Sue, and our diligence in trying to bring forth other priests that have credible allegations against them, such that the bishop there had identified 49 names. He originally only came forward with a handful, and after working together with them, he did identify 49 suspects on his list.
We have looked around the country since the scandal broke years ago, and there has been diocese after diocese after diocese sued, millions of dollars paid out, bankruptcies happening within the church because they can't pay it or they've lost most of the money. Did you pursue that avenue against this man and the diocese?
No, I didn't. I thought about doing it, but the statute of limitations barred me from doing anything criminal or civil toward him or the church.
You have mentioned your wife, Sue, several times tonight. Obviously, family support has been key for you in dealing with this. You have children. It's one of the reasons you said you moved here. Talk to us about the importance of the family support and the reaction of your family.
Yes, as I was scared to death for Sue to find out, I was equally, if not more, scared for my adult children to find out, because my impression of their reaction would be that they would feel toward me the way I felt about myself, that I was a despicable person on the inside, that I wasn't worthy of love or comfort or affection, but I couldn't have been more wrong. My youngest son, Gary, he, after I told him, he looked me right in the eye and told me that if all the fathers were jewels, that you'd be the diamond. And just the support I got. My son Charles, the same kind of thing. He's a big strapping guy, though. His first impression was, where is he? So that part of me is thankful that he had already passed, but the unconditional hug and love and support. And my daughter Tracy, the same thing. She just wept and held me and told me she loved me and that I was a great dad. I was just so in awe of the support my children gave me. And our oldest boy that lives in Massachusetts, the same way. They wept. He wept.
We're going to take a break in just a moment, but before we do, if there is someone watching tonight who has suffered this similar abuse that you did, who hasn't been able to tell their family, How do you enter into that conversation?
I offer my support and guidance. Folks contact me via the website, and we make arrangements. Like I told you earlier there, after my article in the News and Observer, I've had 12 or 14 people so far come forward. Most of those we've met.
But even if they don't contact you, if they're thinking, I've got to have this conversation, what is the first thing they have to say to their family?
They have to sit down with the family and just disclose what they went through. Like the first time I told Sue, it was a G-rated version. Like you say, it's very graphic in the first chapter there, but just give them the G-rated version of what happened.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are on the record tonight with Charles Bailey, who has written this book called In the Shadow of the Cross. When he was 10 years old, living in Syracuse, New York, suffered sexual abuse at the hands of a Roman Catholic priest, wrote this book 43 years later. We were talking a moment ago, you referenced a story that was in the News and Observer, which basically was telling your story as we are doing tonight. Your website was posted there, and we've got that to show us in the shadow of the cross.net. But since that has come, that story was out there, you were contacted by 15, 18 different people who went through abuse.
Correct.
And they wanted to talk with you about how to handle it, what to do, look for support groups. Is that the reason for their contact?
Yes, all of the above. They're looking for other folks that have been through what they've been through, and support group, which we're going to try to get rolling here from National Network.
And SNAP is an acronym for
Survivors Network, those abused by priests. However, it's anyone abused by clergy. Yes, many of these people have contacted us. I say us because some survivors like to talk only to a woman, so my wife will take the calls. Some will only talk to a man, so I'll take the calls. And they're looking for ways, like you said earlier, to tell their family. They're looking for ways to get a support base for themselves going. So we do extensive peer counseling in that area. We offer to meet with them and their loved ones if they like. We offer to any support any way we can.
When's the last time you were in a church?
Quite a while.
4 years ago?
No, we did for several years, like 25 years of our marriage. We've been married 38 years. The first 25, we went to a Methodist church. And that stopped abruptly one day when our pastor stopped by the house to see me, and I had been in the news, and he kind of dropped us like a hot rock after that. So that spoiled me. So that's about the last time I've been in a church.
And in all fairness, abuse runs through every church.
Absolutely.
It runs through every race. It runs through every gender. It runs through every profession.
Absolutely.
There's a great deal of focus because of the aggregate numbers here regarding Roman Catholic priests. But when you see a priest today, does it still, if you see a caller, no matter if it's on an Anglican, an Episcopalian, a Lutheran, a Catholic, is there some type of visceral response that happens within you?
Absolutely. I get a chill. I get an uneasy feeling.
You think you'll ever get over that?
Probably not.
Yeah, I have a friend who is an Anglican priest, and someone walked up to him a couple of months ago and said, "Father, how many children have you abused today?" And this is a man who is not a pedophile. This is a man who has never been involved in anything like that. And he did his best to explain to this person, wait a second, while this may have happened in certain cases here, it's unfair that all of us feel the fallout from this.
And I put the blame squarely on the church for that. If they identified their list of suspects publicly, you would know that when you walked up to this priest or whatever cleric that he's not on our list of suspects. So that falls squarely on the church, because if you don't know who's on their list of those being accused, you don't know who to trust. So that man that did that to that priest didn't know.
But is it unfair? I mean, again, with all due respect, people can be accused of something and not be guilty. Should that list be of people who have been convicted or proven to have been involved in abuse versus just those who are accused of it?
No, it should be those that are accused.
But what if they're innocent?
then that's for the courts to come out and.
But you do understand in cases of abuse, I mean, and in domestic situations at times, there are ex-wives who make accusations toward ex-husbands to get back at people, or there's anger, or it's wrong, but that accusation stays with people forever. Oftentimes people don't remember that there was an acquittal, they remember the charge. But would it be more fair to wait until something had been proven versus the accusation?
Well, I think if in the case of children, we always have to err on the side of children in the circumstance that the children we have to be the advocate for our children. Our children are too young to advocate for themselves. And yes, if it, especially in your profession, you know, if there's a teacher that's accused, it's on the evening news. It's not waited till it went to trial.
I know, and I will say, I'm probably one of the very few voices in our newsroom that says, wait a second, what if this person is innocent? What have we just done to them? Because the police are not always right.
Correct.
As we have seen. Normally they are, but not always. So we're just about out of time. I really want to thank you again for the openness, the courage to talk about this. If people would like to talk with you, they can get in touch with you through your website.
Yes.
In the shadowofthecross.net. But again, we wish you and your family all the best. And hopefully out of this discussion, there will be more discussions for people to have the opportunity for healing, opportunity to not only clear their consciousness, but to talk about this. And maybe as they look in the mirror, see someone different.
Yes.
Charles Bailey, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. If you have something to say about tonight's discussion, send us your comments, questions, criticisms, suggestions to On the Record, Post Office Box 12,000, Raleigh 27605, or email us on the record at WRAL.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/WRAL. Again, we thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day weekend. Again, if you'd like to talk with Mr. Bailey, in the shadowofthecross.net is how you can reach him. One question before we go. Did you see the movie or the play Doubt?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Do you think that priest was guilty in the movie?
Beyond the shadow of a doubt. I have no doubt.
Thanks again for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next Saturday night.
I have no doubt. That was good.